John.
Hello, everybody. I'm John. I'm definitely an alcoholic. For the next month, until December, you have to put up with my crap. What Amber said, our normal Monterey Ruthie had hip replacement surgery. So, like I said, continue to keep her in your prayers. We are on page 76. And as I mentioned last week, today we're going to start steps 8 and 9, the amends. Our big book doesn't have any pictures, so our home group hands out stuff. And we have our amends list handed out, and we'll get into them here in a little bit. And it's weird that the author of this book took 75 pages to do steps 1 through 5. And on page 76, he does steps 6, 7, 8, and 9. So we're going to start rolling now. Before we get started, the book is going to go into different details. We're going to talk about the now amends, all right? And we're getting in that shortly. That's sort of like something you got to do right away. You're going to get that out short. Then you're the later amends. Maybe they'll talk about someone smarting. You want to hold off on that one because somebody's maybe mad at you or something till later. Then you got that maybe one. Maybe I'll do this and maybe not. Then you got that never one. I'm never going to make amends to that SOB. Which I'm sure some of us still have. But, and we'll talk about that too because them nevers can turn into something that's you can do. So, and also that was the timing of our amends, and also we have certain types of amends we make. We have the face-to-face, eyeball-to-eyeball. If you harm someone, face-to-face, eyeball-to-eyeball, do it directly to them. That's one of them. Then we got the equal restitution, and you know about this one. You owe people money. And I'll talk later more on that. I have experience with that too, on how to do that. People don't want to hear I'm sorry. They want to see their money back. We'll talk about that a little bit. Then we have the letters. And I was taught if you harm someone through the mail, then you could do it through the mail. Otherwise, it's face-to-face. Okay, now we're on page 76. And we're going to get started in the book. And we're going to talk about step 8. Like I said before, we just finished steps 4 and 5. And I told you, do not throw them away. Because that's where you're going to get your list from. Your 8-step list, people you've harmed. And that's where you're going to get them. The people that you resent, the people that you harm, conduct, all this. Here's your list. So do not throw that away. That way you can make your list before you make amends. And also, and it says in here, but not really about sponsors, because there's no such thing when I wrote the book. Make sure before you make amends to someone, you clear it with your sponsor or someone else. So you don't harm someone else in the process of it. Justice and brotherly love is the key word for step 8 and step 9. No, and one of the things that I'm going to over and over today is that I've known all my life from my career of hurting people and drinking and all that, is I've said and told people many times, even when I'm drinking, that I'm sorry. And that's not going to fill it. When I got sober, I had to show them I'm sorry. And sometimes the only way you can do that is just by not drinking or picking up that drug. So remember that. This is an action step. We don't tell them. We got to show them. Okay, we're going to get started.
Now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed, and to whom we are willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory.
Step 4.
We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes.
This is the 9-step
Remember,
prayer.
it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. Probably there are still some misgivings. As we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt, we may feel diffident about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. Let us be reassured. To some people, we need not, and probably should not, emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. We might prejudice them. At the moment, we're trying to put our lives in order. But this is not an end in itself.
Okay, this next sentence, when we started the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, they had 5 purposes of the big book in AA. And this is purpose number 4.
Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us.
That is purpose number 4. To be of maximum service to God and the people about us.
It is seldom wise.
This is
to
talking
encounter
about the
individual
later.
who still smarts from our injustice to him and announce that we have gone religious. In the prize ring, this would be called leading with a chin. Why lay ourselves open to being branded fanatics or religious bores? We may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message. But our Lord is sure to be impressed with a sincere desire to set right the wrong. He is going to be more interested in a demonstration of goodwill than in our talk of spiritual discoveries. We don't use this as an excuse for shying away from the subject of God.
This is the maybe.
When it will serve any good purpose, we are willing to announce our convictions with tact and common sense. The question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. It may be he has done us more harm than we have done him. And though we may have acquired a better attitude toward him, we are still not too keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. It is harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial to us. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret.
This is directions on how to make them, and it's a warning.
Under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. Simply, we tell him that we will never get over drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. We are there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so, never trying to tell him what he should do. His faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the result.
We are there to sweep off our side of the street. You know, what their response is really none of our business. I know the first time I did this, and we'll talk about this in this next paragraph, I went where I worked at, I got sober, and they let me go because I was drinking, which today is against the law. But back then it wasn't. So I got sober and I got out of the treatment center, and 3 months later I got my job back, and I went into the office of the manager and to make my amends because I was on step 9. And I made my amends to him, and he said, "John, I ain't seen nothing. I ain't seen nothing out of here yet, and since you got out of here, you're a dumb, stupid drunk. Then you're an asshole now. Get the hell out of my office." He kicked me out of his office. I was pissed. So I go to my sponsor with my head between my crying and everything. He says, "John, you did your part. What's their response is none of your business." Now, the good theory about that is about five years later, I went back to this guy and I told him I was 5 years sober, and that if things are doing better right now. And I went, nah, I got 5 years. And it actually, told it before he left the company, he said he was proud of me. But when you go to make these amends, what their response is none of your business. You're there to get your garbage out, to make what is right what you wronged.
In 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes the man we are calling upon admits his own fault. So feuds of understanding melt away in an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we are doing and wish us well. Occasionally, they will offer assistance. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We have made our demonstration, done our part. It's water over the dam. Most alcoholics owe money. We do not dodge our creditors. Telling them what we are trying to do, we make no bones about our drinking. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. Nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory it may cause financial harm. Approached in this way, the most ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us. Arranging the best deal we can, we let these people know we are sorry. Our drinking has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go, for we are liable to drink if we are afraid to face them.
You know, and this is with this equal restitution thing. You know, let's say I go up to Robert over here and I go to make amends with Robert. Robert, 2 years ago, I stole $5,000 off you. I'm sorry, Robert. What are you gonna say?
I want that $5,000.
See that? I got to make an approach to pay him back, even if it's like $10 a month or whatever like that. You got to show them you're sorry. See that? And a situation this happened with me in my sobriety, back in my prime when I was doing all my drinking and drugging. My mom was a secretary for elementary school. All right. And she had money hidden in a room from the school. Well, I went and stole this money. It was like $400. Went and bought some pot. That's back when it wasn't legal. Now it is. So, you know, we won't talk about that. But so when I got sober, I got out of the treatment center and I started to make my amends. I lived with my parents my first couple of years when I got sober. And when I got sober, I says, Mom, I'm sorry I stole that money. She goes, I know you did, you son of a bitch. I go, Mom, I'm sorry. She goes, I'm sorry. He said, I want to see some money. So when I got my job back, and I learned this through AA, I started paying rent while I lived there, and I paid her back that $400. Show them you're sorry. That was just an example.
Perhaps we have committed a criminal offense, which might land us in jail if it were known to the authorities. We may be short in our accounts and unable to make good. We have already admitted this in confidence to another person, but we are sure we would be imprisoned or lose our job if it were known. Maybe it's only a petty offense, such as padding the expense account. Most of us have done that sort of thing. Maybe we are divorced and have remarried, but haven't kept up the alimony to number one. She is indignant about it and has a warrant out for our arrest. That's a common form of trouble, too. Although these reparations take innumerable forms, there are some general principles which we find guiding. Reminding ourselves that we have decided to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience.
Okay, this next sentence is another 9-step prayer.
We ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences may be. We may lose our position or reputation or face jail, but we are willing. We have to be. We must not shrink at anything.
Okay, this next paragraph and a couple sentences is there's a specific thing on the end of step 9 that says, except when to do so what injured them or others when you're making these amends. Now, you can't hurt other people when you're making these amends. And one of them is yourself, too. And I'll go into more detail about this, because if they're in jail, they can't provide for other. For example, you make these amends, and this was told by a story Ruthie told me. It says this girl got out of a treatment center, and she was all gung ho on making amends right away. She wasn't thinking, and she goes to her husband, which they're separated. Is, by the way, this last kid wasn't yours; it was someone else. I'm sorry. What good was that do? That would do nothing good whatsoever. So you gotta, like I said, you gotta make sure you're not harming another person.
Usually, however, other people are involved. Therefore, we are not to be the hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcoholic pit. A man we know had remarried. Because of resentment and drinking, he had not paid alimony to his first wife. She was furious. She went to court and got an order for his arrest. He had commenced our way of life, had secured a position, and was getting his head above water. It would have been impressive heroics if he had walked up to the judge and said, "Here I am." We thought he ought to be willing to do that if necessary, but if he were in jail, he could provide nothing for either family. We suggested he write his first wife, admitting his faults and asking forgiveness. He did, and also sent a small amount of money. He told her what he would try to do in the future. He said he was perfectly willing to go to jail if she insisted. Of course she did not, and the whole situation has long since been adjusted. Before taking drastic action that might implicate other people, we secured their consent. If we have obtained permission, have consulted with others, asked God to help, and the drastic step is indicated, we must not shrink.
Like I said, make sure that when you're making these amends, you go over with your sponsor when you're doing these steps. Because make sure you don't hurt yourself or others.
This brings to mind a story about one of our friends. While drinking, he accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival, giving him no receipt for it. He subsequently denied having received the money and used the incident as a basis for discrediting the man. He thus used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, his rival was ruined. He felt that he had done a wrong he could not possibly make right. If he opened that old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, disgrace his family, and take away his means of livelihood. What right had he to involve those dependent upon him? How could he possibly make a public statement exonerating his rival? After consulting with his wife and partner, he came to the conclusion that it was better to take those risks than to stand before his Creator guilty of such ruinous slander. He saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again, and all would be lost anyhow. He attended church for the first time in many years. After the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. His action met widespread approval, and today he is one of the most trusted citizens of his town. This all happened years ago.
Oh, you always hear that saying, faith with works. Well, this was working with faith.
The chances are that we have domestic troubles. Perhaps we are mixed up with women in a fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised. We doubt if alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. But drinking does complicate sex relations in the home. After a few years with an alcoholic, a wife gets worn out, resentful, and uncommunicative. How could she be anything else? The husband begins to feel lonely, sorry for himself. He commences to look around in the nightclubs, or their equivalent, for something besides liquor. Perhaps he is having a secret and exciting affair with the girl who understands. In fairness, we must say that she may understand. But what are we going to do about a thing like that? A man so involved often feels very remorseful at times, especially if he is married to a loyal and courageous girl who has literally gone through hell for him. Whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. If we are sure our wife does not know, should we tell her? Not always, we think.
This is an example of a never amends.
If she knows in a general way that we've been wild, should we tell her in detail? Undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. She may insist on knowing all the particulars. She will want to know who the woman is and where she is. We feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. We are sorry for what we have done, and, God willing, it shall not be repeated. More than that, we cannot do. We have no right to go further. Though there may be justifiable exceptions, and though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort, we have often found this is the best course to take. Our design for living is not a one-way street.
You hear that? That's what this program is all about. It's not a design for stopping drinking and drugging. What we're learning here through these steps is we're designed for living on how to stay sober and live life sober.
It is as good for the wife as for the husband. If we can forget, so can she. It is better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person upon whom she can vent jealousy. Perhaps there are some cases where the utmost frankness is demanded. No outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. It may be that both will decide that the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. Each might pray about it, having the other one's happiness uppermost in mind. Keep it always in sight that we are dealing with that most terrible human emotion, jealousy. Good generalship may decide that the problem be attacked on the flank, rather than risk a face-to-face combat. If we have no such complication, there is plenty we should do at home. Sometimes we hear an alcoholic say that the only thing he needs to do is to keep sober. Certainly, he must keep sober, for there will be no home if he doesn't. But he is yet a long way from making good to the wife or parents, whom for years he has so shockingly treated. Passing all understanding is the patience mothers and wives have had with alcoholics. Had this not been so, many of us would have no homes today, would perhaps be dead.
This next paragraph, and we stress this on and on, sobriety is just not enough. We got to change our whole rotten way of life. And that's what this says. This is what making these amends and going through these steps is all about.
The alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken. Sweet relationships are dead. Affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. We feel a man is unthinking when he says that sobriety is enough. He is like the farmer who came up out of his cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife, he remarked, "Don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing?"
Now we're going to talk about the last part of these amends, which I forgot to mention earlier. We got the face-to-face equal, letter or phone call, and now we're going to talk about the living amends. And that's the most important ones. And sometimes you got to show them you're sorry instead of telling them. And sometimes the only way we can do that is just by not drinking and by not doing what we did before again. Change.
Yes, there is a long period of reconstruction yet. We must take the lead. A remorseful mumbling that we are sorry won't fill the bill at all. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it, being very careful not to criticize them. Their defects may be glaring, but the chances are that our own actions are partly responsible. So we clean house with the family, asking each morning
Another prayer
that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. Unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not to urge them. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. Our behavior will convince them more than our words.
See that? Our behavior will convince them more than your words. Show them that we're sorry by your actions. I could say, I'm sorry a million times, and that ain't going to help. I got to show them we're sorry by living a new way of
We
life.
must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter, and there may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases. But we don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone.
You know,
If we are
someone told me about, there are some situations where you can't make amends. Like someone you harmed died, moved away, whether there are, or other circumstances like that. And someone once told me to, and I know someone in this home group that just did it the past weekend. Let's say you know someone that wants to go to a banquet last night. All right, you don't want to go, so anonymously you give them that ticket, and that way you're making amends to someone you harmed you didn't know about in the past. Do something nice to someone else, and don't tell no one. Don't get caught. That's a way to make amends to people if you know that you can't ever make amends to them again. Someone you passed away, go give them a letter to a grave. Example, just like that. There's ways to do that, and that's your responsibility. But the best way to do it is do something nice for someone and don't get caught anonymously. Okay, now we're going to get into the promises. And I love it when I didn't realize this until Ruthie told us when we got to this. You hear these promises a lot before the meetings, all right? And what she told us too, and I believe it is the truth, that these promises are the same things we had when we were drinking. But this time we get them and we realize it and we accept them into our life. When I was drinking, I was amazed before I was halfway through. When I was smashed and drunk, I knew a new freedom and a new happiness. When I was sitting at the bar, I did not regret the past or wish to shut the door on it. When I had a fifth of black velvet down me, I would comprehend the word serenity and I would know peace. All right. When I got that DUI, no matter how far down the scale I'd gone, I knew that my experience can benefit others. When I was drinking, that feeling of uselessness and self-pity would disappear. When I was sitting at the bar, I would lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in fellows. I'm buying tonight. I used to do that a lot. So when I was drinking, self-sleeping would slip away. And also, when I was smashed, especially or late at night, my whole attitude and outlook on life would change because it took away my fear. And when I was drinking, my fear of people and economic insecurity would leave me. I wasn't afraid of nobody. Even the guys that were trying to beat me up on the outside of the bar were 6 foot tall and I was only 5 foot because I thought I could handle it. When I was drinking, I would totally know how to handle situations would baffle me. I knew it all. And when I was drinking, I suddenly realized that booze was doing for me what I could not do for myself. And when she first said that, I realized, boy, that was the truth. But now when you start making these amends, and you start getting these promises, and they do happen. But guess what? Like I said, everything else, when we do these steps, the only step we do 100% every day is step 1. All right. The rest of the steps we work on each day, and we only get them for one day. Sometimes you get some of these promises that day, sometimes you won't. So remember that. So we're going to get into these promises and think about what I said when you were drinking or getting high, what these things were doing. Now you can feel them and realize that they're coming true and really do know it.
Painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises?
We think not. Here comes the 13th promise.
We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly.
Spiritual
sometimes
experience,
slowly.
spiritual awakening.
They will always materialize if we work for them.
Right there. They will materialize if we work for them. You have to do the steps in order to get them. Okay, next week we're going to get into steps 10.